People study history because they want to learn from history. They want to study past events and say, because of a past event, I know what is coming. And that's really exactly why Bar Kochba became so famous. You see, after the first temple, the first Beit HaMikdash in Jerusalem was destroyed by the Babylonians, 70 years passed, and 70 years later, the second temple was built. So the rabbis have this tradition that when a temple is destroyed, 70 years later, a new temple will be built. And so what happens in the year 70? The Romans destroy temple number 2, Beit HaMikdash temple number 2. So that means if there's this tradition that every 70 years another temple is being built, you can imagine around 70 plus 70, 140. You can imagine that a lot of excitement, right? Maybe in 139 or 138, there's a lot of excitement thinking maybe the prophecy is going to become true. Maybe actually, just like the first temple, after the first one was destroyed 70 years later, now maybe things are going to happen. So Rome is in charge, but there's excitement about maybe we're going to get Jerusalem back. And that's really what brought this guy, Bar Kochba, into favor. And people thought he is the guy who is going to save us. If you recall, during Lag BaOmer in your Jewish studies class, you learned a little bit about Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva was actually a big supporter of Bar Kochba. You might also recall that on the Omer, one of the reasons it was sad was because all of Rabbi Akiva's students, 24,000 of them, were dying because they weren't nice to one another. However, some scholars believe that that is actually a hint or a secret code word saying those 24 students of Rabbi Akiva were actually followers of Bar Kochba and actually were killed by that time. Most scholars believe that Bar Kochba did not even have a chance. Most scholars believe that Bar Kochba made a horrible mistake in trying to attack Rome. However, we know he had some initial big victories. We even know that there are some coins that were minted with Bar Kokhba's face on them, and so that means how long do you have to stay in power for you to be able to say we better start making our own money with our own faces on them? So that must mean that Bar Kokhba was around for a while, but the repercussions once Rome felt like Bar Kokhba was a threat, they came in with a lot of force. They really kicked everyone out of Jerusalem for good. They actually went ahead and all the fields around the city of Jerusalem, they actually plowed with salt so nothing could be grown there for for many years, hundreds of years to come. So Bar Kokhba was a dreamer, and maybe Rabbi Akiva was a dreamer and believing in Bar Kokhba, but there was a real sense that if the first temple was destroyed and then rebuilt 70 years later, maybe that will happen now. So sometimes history is really interesting that it gives us a hope that turns out to be a false hope. And in the case of Bar Kokhba and his rebellion, it was really a false and misguided hope.